They laughed when she drove away in a rusted Honda Civic, clutching a cardboard box of personal belongings. They whispered that Vivian Hall was finished, washed up, divorced, and completely broke. Her ex-husband, the CEO of the very company that just fired her, toasted to his freedom with his new younger fiancée. But what none of them knew was that Vivian wasn't leaving with nothing. She was leaving with a plan. And while they were busy spending millions, she was quietly preparing to buy them out. This is the story of how the discarded wife became the boss. The glass walls of the conference room on the 45th floor of the Sterling and Company. Building offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, but Vivian Hall felt like the walls were closing in. The air conditioning was humming a low, indifferent drone against the sudden silence that had fallen over the room. Across the long mahogany table sat Robert Sterling, the man she had built this company with the man she had been married to for 12 years. Next to him sat Tiffany Blair, the 26-year-old marketing director, who had been hired 6 months ago and had quickly ascended to being Robert's right hand in the boardroom, and as the tabloids had confirmed last week in his bedroom. "It's just business, Viv," Robert said, his voice smooth, practicing that fake empathy he used on shareholders when earnings were down. He pushed a thin file across the polished wood. "The board feels, I feel, that with the divorce proceedings becoming public, your presence here as Chief Operations Officer is a distraction. It's creating volatility." Vivian looked at the file. It was a termination notice. "Volatility," Vivian repeated. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly beneath the table. "I stabilized the European sector last quarter, Rob. I secured the merger with Kincaid Logistics. The only volatility is the scandal you created." Tiffany chimed in, checking her manicured nails. "Vivian, let's be real. The culture at Sterling & Co. is evolving. We need fresh energy. Your methods are a bit traditional. We're offering you a generous severance package. 6 months' pay." Vivian's eyes narrowed. 6 months. She had liquidated her own inheritance to fund this company's startup phase 10 years ago. She had worked 80-hour weeks while Rob schmoozed investors at golf clubs in the Hamptons. "I own 15% of this company, Rob," Vivian said, ignoring Tiffany. "You can't just fire me," Robert sighed, adjusting his silk tie, a tie Vivian had bought him for his birthday. "Actually, per the pre-nuptial agreement and the shareholder bylaws we amended 2 years ago, which you signed, remember, in the event of a divorce where a conflict of interest arises, the majority shareholder has the right to buy out the minority at current market evaluation to protect the company's integrity." He slid a second document forward, a check. "The evaluation came in this morning," Rob said, a smug corner of his mouth lifting. "The stock dipped significantly after the scandal broke. I'm buying your shares at today's rate. It's modest, but it's fair." Vivian looked at the number. It was insulting. It was a fraction of what her shares were worth a month ago. He had tanked the company's reputation on purpose, she realized. He had created the scandal to drive the price down so he could force her out cheap. "If you don't sign," Robert's lawyer, a shark named Peterson, spoke up from the corner, "we will tie up your assets in litigation for years. You'll be liable for legal fees. You'll be bankrupt within 6 months, Vivian. Take the check. Walk away. Start over." Vivian looked around the room. The faces of the board members' men she had worked with, men whose families she knew were all turned away. They had chosen the winner. They chose the charisma, the flash, the man on the magazine's covers. She stood up slowly. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the water pitcher at Tiffany, though every fiber of her being wanted to. "You think I'm the liability?" Vivian asked quietly. She picked up the pen. "You're making a mistake, Rob. You're good at the show, but you don't know how to run the machine." "I think I'll manage," Rob laughed. "Enjoy your retirement, Viv." She signed the papers. She took the check, which was barely enough to cover a year of rent in the city, considering the debts Rob had secretly racked up on their joint accounts that she was now partially responsible for. She walked out of the office, carrying a single cardboard box. As she waited for the elevator, she heard the laughter erupt from the conference room. The sound of champagne corks popping followed. Down in the lobby, the security guard, old Mr. Henderson, looked at her with sad eyes. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sterling. I mean, Ms. Hall." "It's okay, clear the way, Henderson," Vivian said softly. She walked out the revolving doors. It was raining. She didn't hail a cab. She walked 3 blocks to a parking garage where her company car, a Mercedes, was parked. But as she approached it, the valet shook his head. "Mr. Sterling called," the valet said, looking at his shoes. "The company car is to be returned. He said you can call an Uber." Vivian stood in the rain, the water soaking her blouse. This was it. The absolute bottom. No job, no husband, no car. And thanks to the legal loopholes Rob had exploited, barely any money compared to the empire she helped build, she walked to the corner and bought a prepaid phone card at a bodega. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 5 years. "Hello," a gruff voice answered. "Arthur." Vivian said, water dripping from her nose. "It's done. They cut me loose." "Did you get the check?" the voice asked. "I have it." "Good. Don't cash it yet. We have work to do." 3 months later. The rumors had spread through New York's elite circles like wildfire. "Did you hear about Vivian?" they whispered at charity galas she was no longer invited to. Living in a studio apartment in Queens. Driving a 10-year-old Honda. Someone saw her shopping at a discount grocery store with coupons. It was all true. Vivian Hall, once the Queen of Fifth Avenue, was now living in a 400-square-foot walk-up in Astoria. The paint was peeling, and the radiator clanked like a dying engine at 3 a.m. She sat at a wobbly IKEA table, illuminated by the harsh light of a single desk lamp. The walls were covered not with art, but with spreadsheets, complex webs of financial data market trends and corporate filings taped together. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her mother. "Rob sent us a Christmas card with Tiffany." "It's so embarrassing, Vivian. Why didn't you fight for more alimony?" "You look weak." Vivian deleted the message. She took a sip of instant coffee. It tasted like battery acid. A far cry from the $12 lattes Tiffany was undoubtedly drinking at that very moment. She pulled up the live stock feed on her laptop, an old heavy brick of a machine she'd bought second-hand. Sterling and Company, STL, $42.50 up. The stock was up. Rob was riding the high of the new direction. He had announced a pivot into AI-driven media, a buzzword-heavy strategy that made investors drool, but had zero infrastructure behind it. Vivian knew it was smoke and mirrors. She knew the internal burn rate of the company, because she was the one who had set up the accounts. Rob was spending cash faster than he was making it, masking the losses with creative accounting and aggressive PR campaigns. There was a knock at the door. Vivian opened it to reveal Arthur Penn. He was a man in his 60s wearing a frayed tweed jacket and carrying a wet umbrella. To the outside world, Arthur was a retired actuary, a boring man who liked chess and silence. To Vivian, he was the sharpest forensic accountant on the East Coast, a man who had been blacklisted by the big banks for being too honest. "Smells like mold," Arthur grunted, stepping inside. "It keeps me humble," Vivian said, clearing a stack of papers from the only other chair. "What's the word on the street?" Arthur sat down and pulled a crumpled bag of bagels out of his pocket. "They're laughing at you, Viv. I had lunch with a friend at Goldman. They say Rob is calling you the bag lady. He's telling everyone you had a breakdown." "Good," Vivian said, her eyes cold. "Let them think I'm broken. Let them think I'm irrelevant. When you're invisible, you can go anywhere. You're playing a dangerous game," Arthur warned. "You used the entire settlement check, every dime, to set up the shell corporation in the Caymans. If this goes south, you're not just broke, you're destitute." "I'm already destitute, Arthur," she replied. "I'm investing in the crash." Arthur pulled out a document. "I looked into the Kincaid merger you mentioned. You were right. Rob fired the compliance team last week to save money for his new yacht. He's pushing the merger through without due diligence." Vivian smiled for the first time in months. "He doesn't know that Kincaid's logistics chain is heavily leveraged in volatile foreign debt. I told him that 6 months ago. He wasn't listening." "So what's the play?" "We wait," Vivian said. "We wait for the first earnings call where he can't hide the bleeding. And while we wait, I need a job." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "A job who's going to hire you?" "You signed a non-compete clause." "I can't work in management," Vivian agreed. "But the non-compete doesn't say anything about entry-level service staff." 2 weeks later, Vivian stood in front of a mirror in a cramped locker room, adjusting a green apron. She pinned a name tag to her chest, V.I.V. She wasn't working at a diner. She had secured a job at the Summit, the exclusive members-only coffee bar and lounge located in the lobby of the financial district's most prestigious building, the building directly across the street from Sterling and Company. It was the spot where all the mid-level executives and gossip-hungry assistants from her old company came for their morning caffeine fix. "Order up triple shot venti for Greg." Vivian handed the cup across the counter. Greg, a junior analyst at Sterling and Company, whom she had hired 2 years ago, took the cup without looking at her face. He was too busy looking at his phone. "Did you see Tiffany's new office remodel?" Greg was saying to his colleague. "Marble floors. Meanwhile, they cut our travel budget." "Yeah, but the stock is hitting $50, the colleague replied. "Rob is a genius." Vivian wiped the counter, her head down. She was invisible, just a middle-aged woman in a green apron. But her ears were wide open. Over the next month, she became a ghost in the machine. She learned which departments were panicking. She heard the hushed whispers about vendors not getting paid on time. She heard the HR director complaining about the high turnover rate because Rob was screaming at people in meetings. Then one Tuesday she walked in. Tiffany Blair entered the Summit like she owned it. She was wearing a white cashmere coat that probably cost more than Vivian's entire year of rent. She was on the phone, her voice loud and entitled. "I don't care what the Regulatory Commission says, tell them to delay the audit," Tiffany snapped into her phone. She lowered her sunglasses and looked at Vivian. She didn't recognize her. Vivian had lost weight. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore thick-rimmed glasses. To Tiffany, Vivian was just the help. "Skinny latte, oat milk. Make it fast." Tiffany ordered, tapping her credit card on the terminal. Vivian punched in the order. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to grab Tiffany by the cashmere lapels and shake her. Instead, she smiled a tight service industry smile. "Coming right up." As she steamed the milk, Tiffany continued her call. "Rob is freaking out about the Q3 numbers. We need to shift the debt to the subsidiary before the 15th. Just make it happen." Vivian's hand froze for a split second. Shift the debt to the subsidiary. That was illegal. That was fraud. Vivian handed the cup to Tiffany. "Have a wonderful day," she said, her voice dropping an octave. Tiffany snatched the cup and stormed out. Vivian untied her apron. "Hey, Viv, where are you going?" "It's the morning rush," her manager shouted. "I'm taking my break," Vivian said, pulling out her phone. She walked into the alleyway behind the coffee shop and dialed Arthur. "Arthur," she said, her voice vibrating with adrenaline. "It's starting. They're cooking the books. Get the Cayman account ready. We're going to start shorting the stock, but we need more capital." "How much more?" "More than I have," Vivian said. "I need to visit the dragon." Arthur went silent. "Vivian, you can't be serious." "Silas Vance. He hates your ex-husband, but he's a shark. He'll eat you alive." "He hates Rob," Vivian corrected. "That's exactly why he'll listen. I'm going to see him tonight." "You don't have a car. You don't have a dress. You don't have an invitation to his gala." Vivian looked down at her coffee-stained sneakers. "I'll figure it out. Tonight, the broke housewife is going to make a comeback." Silas Vance was not just wealthy. He was old money, the kind of money that whispered rather than shouted. His annual spring solstice gala was held at his sprawling estate in the Hudson Valley. It was the most exclusive ticket of the season, a fortress of wealth guarded by private security and an ironclad guest list. Vivian Hall stood at the edge of the estate's perimeter fence. It was raining again, a cold, miserable drizzle that seemed to follow her like a curse. She was wearing a black evening gown she had found at a high-end consignment shop for $80. It was a vintage piece, elegant, but dated and slightly tight around the ribs. Getting in the front door was impossible. She wasn't on the list. But Vivian knew this house. She and Rob had attended this party 4 years ago, back when Silas was considering investing in Sterling and Company. Rob had arrogantly insulted Silas's wine collection, and Silas had coolly escorted them out. Rob had called Silas a dinosaur. Vivian knew Silas had a long memory. She skirted the perimeter until she found the caterer's entrance. 2 large vans were unloading trays of hors d'oeuvres. "Hey, you with the temp agency," a harried woman with a clipboard shouted at her. Vivian didn't hesitate. "Yes, I got lost." "Sorry." "Grab a tray. Get inside. We're short-staffed." Vivian grabbed a tray of champagne flutes. She walked right past security, her head down, blending into the machinery of the event. Once inside the kitchen, amidst the chaos of chefs shouting orders, she ditched the tray on a counter, slipped out a side door and entered the ballroom. The room was a sea of tuxedos and jewels. She spotted Silas Vance immediately. He was sitting in a velvet armchair in the corner, holding court, looking bored as a line of sycophants tried to impress him. Vivian took a deep breath. She had one shot. She walked straight up to him, cutting the line. A security guard stepped forward to intercept her. "Mr. Vance," Vivian said, her voice projecting clearly over the din of the jazz band. "My name is Vivian Hall. My ex-husband called you a dinosaur 4 years ago. I'm here to tell you that the comet is coming, and I know exactly where it's going to land." Silas Vance looked up. His eyes, sharp and grey, assessed her. He saw the slightly worn dress, the determination in her jaw, the desperation she was trying so hard to hide. He waved the security guard away. "The ex-Mrs. Sterling." Silas croaked, a dry smile forming. "I heard you were living in a box." "It's a very small box," Vivian admitted, "but it has excellent Wi-Fi." The crowd around them tittered nervously. "You have 2 minutes," Silas said. "Impress me." Sterling and Company is trading at $42. They're announcing Q3 earnings next week. Everyone expects a 10% bump because of the Kincaid merger. But the Kincaid logistics chain is built on bad debt in Southeast Asia. When the market opens on Monday, news will break about a regulatory audit on their shipping containers. Rob Sterling is moving debt to offshore subsidiaries to hide the losses. It's Enron Light Silas. Silas didn't blink. "And how do you know this?" "Because I built the systems he's trying to manipulate, and because his mistress talks too loud when she orders her coffee." Silas chuckled. It was a dry, rasping sound. "You want to short the stock?" "I'm already shorting it," Vivian lied. She had put every penny she had into it, but it was a drop in the bucket. "I want you to put the nail in the coffin. I want you to dump your holdings and publicly question the audit. If Silas Vance loses faith, the street loses faith. Why should I help you? You're just a scorned woman looking for revenge." Vivian leaned in close. "This isn't revenge, Silas. It's a correction. Rob is a gambler. I'm the house, and the house always wins eventually. Do you want to be on the side of the gambler who's bluffing, or the one who knows the cards?" Silas studied her for a long, agonizing moment. Then he raised his glass. "I never liked your husband. He has weak hands." Silas turned to his assistant. "Get Miss Hall a drink, and set up a meeting for 8 a.m. tomorrow. If her data checks out, we kill the beast." Vivian didn't smile. She just nodded. 8 a.m. I'll bring the bagels." The week leading up to the earnings call was the longest of Vivian's life. She spent her days at the coffee shop serving lattes to the very people she was about to destroy, and her nights at Silas Vance's office poring over documents with his team of forensic analysts. Silas was thorough. He didn't trust easily. But as Vivian walked him through the labyrinth of shell companies Rob had set up, Silas's skepticism turned to respect. "He's sloppy," Silas muttered on the third night, looking at a balance sheet. "He thinks he's invincible. He thinks he's the smartest person in the room," Vivian said. "That's why he'll miss the signs." The morning of the earnings call arrived. Vivian wasn't at the coffee shop. She was in Silas Vance's trading floor, a massive room filled with screens and shouting traders. She stood on the balcony overlooking the pit, wearing a crisp new suit Silas had advanced her the money for. On the giant screen, the face of Robert Sterling appeared via video link. He looked tan and rested, sitting in his office with Tiffany beaming beside him. "We are thrilled to report another record-breaking quarter," Rob began, his voice booming through the speakers. "The synergy with Kincaid Logistics is exceeding all expectations." The stock price on the ticker ticked up. $44.50. $45. "Wait for it," Vivian whispered. Just as Rob began to speak about future projections, a news alert flashed across the bottom of the Bloomberg terminals. "Breaking SEC. Launches probe into Sterling and Company accounting practices. Breaking Kincaid Logistics assets. Frozen in Singapore." The room went silent for a heartbeat. On the screen, Rob's assistant whispered something in his ear. Rob's smile faltered. He looked at the camera, confusion clouding his eyes. We are receiving some unconfirmed reports." "Now," Silas Vance yelled from the floor. The traders unleashed hell. Silas Vance's firm dumped 5 million shares of Sterling and Company in a single block trade. It was a massive vote of no confidence. The ticker stalled, then plummeted. $45 to $38. Panic set in on Wall Street. The algorithms picked up the sell-off and amplified it. $38 to $30. On the screen, Rob was sweating. "These are just rumors, market manipulation. Our fundamentals are strong." Then the second blow landed. A whistleblower report anonymously submitted by Arthur Penn, compiled from Vivian's data, was leaked to the Financial Times. It detailed the debt hiding the inflated assets and the fraudulent merger data. $30 to $18, Vivian watched the number fall. Every tick down was Rob's legacy evaporating. Every red number was justice. "They're halting trading," someone shouted. The NYSE paused trading on Sterling and Company due to volatility, but the damage was done. The stock had lost 60% of its value in 20 minutes. Vivian's phone buzzed. It was a text from her mother. "My God, Vivian, Rob is on the news. Are you okay?" Vivian didn't reply. She watched as the trading resumed. The sell-off continued. By the time the closing bell rang, Sterling and Company was trading at $4.15. It was a penny stock. The company was essentially worthless. Rob was ruined. His margin calls would be triggering right now. The banks would be seizing his yacht, his penthouse, his cars. Silas Vance walked up to the balcony and stood beside Vivian. He lit a cigar, defying the building's smoking ban. "You just made me $40 million in short positions, Ms. Hall," Silas said. "I'm glad to be of service," Vivian replied calmly. "So what now? You take your cut and retire to the south of France. Find a younger man." Vivian looked at the screen at the wreckage of the company she had built. She saw the employees leaving the building across the street, boxes in hand, looking terrified. She saw Greg the analyst crying on the sidewalk. She hadn't done this to destroy them. She had done this to save the company from Rob. "No," Vivian said. "Now we buy it back." Silas raised an eyebrow. "You want to buy a sinking ship? It's on fire, Vivian." "The hull is solid," Vivian said. "The captain was the problem. The product is good. The people are good. They just need leadership. With the stock at $4, we can acquire a controlling interest for pennies on the dollar." "We?" Silas asked. "You provide the capital. I provide the expertise. I run it. You stay silent, partner. We split the profits 60-40. My favor." Silas laughed, a genuine hearty laugh. "You have guts, Vivian. I'll give you that. 50-50. And you fire the marketing director personally." Vivian smiled. A real dangerous smile. "Deal." 72 hours. That's how long it took for Sterling and Co. to bleed out. The stock had stabilized at a pathetic $3.80. The headlines were savage. The Sterling crash CEO, investigated for fraud and end of an era. The board of directors, terrified of personal liability, had called an emergency meeting to discuss a buyout offer from a mysterious holding company, known only as Phoenix LLC. They had no choice but to accept. Phoenix LLC was offering $5 a share, a premium over the current junk price, but a steal compared to the company's value just a week ago. It was Monday morning. The rain had finally stopped, replaced by a crisp, blinding sunlight that bounced off the skyscrapers of Manhattan. Vivian stood in the lobby of the Sterling building. She wasn't wearing the green barista apron. She wasn't wearing the frantic, rain-soaked clothes of a discarded wife. She was wearing a bespoke navy suit, sharp enough to cut glass, and stilettos that clicked with the authority of a judge's gavel. She walked past the Summit coffee shop. She saw her old manager, the one who had yelled at her for taking a break. He was wiping a counter, looking exhausted. He looked up, saw her, and froze. He didn't recognize her at first. The posture was different. The energy was different. Then his jaw dropped. Vivian didn't stop. She gave him a curt nod, a small mercy, and moved toward the security turnstiles. Mr. Henderson, the old security guard, was there. He looked tired. The rumor was that layoffs were starting today. "I need to see identification, ma'am," Henderson said, automatically not looking up from his logbook. "Hello, Henderson," Vivian said softly. The old man looked up. His eyes widened behind his spectacles. "Miss Hall, I mean. Mrs. Sterling, I heard terrible things. I thought—" "You heard I was broke," Vivian finished for him. She placed her hand on the turnstile. "I was. But things change quickly in this town. I can't let you up, Ma'am. Mr. Sterling issued a specific ban. Mr. Sterling doesn't run this building anymore." "Henderson," Vivian said. She held up a key card. It was a black master key, issued only to ownership. She tapped it against the sensor. Beep. The light turned green. "Keep the lobby clear, Henderson," she said, stepping through. "I'm expecting the press in about an hour." She stepped into the elevator. The ride to the 45th floor felt different this time. The last time she was in this metal box, She was crying, holding a cardboard box. This time she checked her reflection. No tears. Just focus. The doors opened. The 45th floor was in chaos. People were running around with shredders. Phones were ringing, unanswered. It smelled like panic. Vivian walked straight past the reception desk. The receptionist, a girl named Chloe, who used to sneer at Vivian's fashion choices, was frantically typing a resume on her screen. She gasped as Vivian swept past. "You can't go in there," Chloe squeaked. "The board is in session." "I know," Vivian said, not breaking stride. "I called the meeting." She reached the double oak doors of the conference room. She could hear shouting from inside. "We have to take the deal." It was Peterson, the lawyer. "Phoenix LLC is the only lifeboat we have. If we don't sell, the SEC shuts the doors by Friday." "I built this company," Rob's voice screamed back. He sounded unhinged. "I will not sell to some shell company vulture who is behind Phoenix. Who is it? Is it Cuban? Is it Musk? It doesn't matter who it is." "Rob," another board member yelled. "You're done. We voted you out 10 minutes ago as CEO. Now we're just negotiating the surrender." Vivian pushed the doors open. They swung wide with a heavy thud. The room went dead silent. 12 men turned to look. At the head of the table, Rob Sterling stood disheveled. His tie was loose, his eyes bloodshot, his face pale with the stubble of neglect. Next to him sat Tiffany, looking small and terrified, clutching a designer bag as if it contained the last of her oxygen. And sitting at the far end of the table, calm as a monk, was Arthur Penn. "Gentlemen," Arthur said, standing up, "I believe you've met the majority shareholder of Phoenix LLC. Rob stared at Vivian. He blinked once, twice. His brain couldn't process the image. Vivian Hall, the woman he had left with a pittance, the woman living in Astoria, Viv, Rob whispered. A nervous laugh bubbled up from his throat. What are you doing here? Did you come to beg for your job back? I told you security is—" "Sit down, Rob," Vivian said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made the air heavy. She walked to the head of the table. Rob didn't move. He stood his ground, trying to summon his old dominance. "You're trespassing," Rob spat. "Get out before I have you arrested." Vivian looked at Peterson, the lawyer. "Mr. Peterson, please inform Mr. Sterling of the current ownership structure." Peterson looked at his papers, his hands shaking. He looked at Vivian, then at Rob. "Rob, Phoenix LLC acquired 51% of the voting stock this morning. The wire transfer cleared 10 minutes ago." "So," Rob yelled, "who is Phoenix?" "She is—" Peterson whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. Rob looked at Vivian. You're broke. I saw your bank accounts. I saw the alimony checks. You have nothing." "I had nothing," Vivian corrected. "Then I bet against you. And Rob, you made it so easy. You were so busy looking at your reflection, you didn't notice the cliff." She pulled out his chair, and sat down. "Now," Vivian said, clasping her hands on the table. "Let's get down to business. The company is ours. And by ours, I mean mine." The board members were dismissed. They scurried out of the room like cockroaches when the lights turn on, grateful to keep their pensions terrified, to make eye contact with the new boss. Only 3 people remained in the conference room, Vivian, Rob, and Tiffany. Rob collapsed into a chair opposite Vivian. The fight had drained out of him, replaced by a dawning, horrific realization. "How?" Rob asked, his voice cracking. "Where did you get the capital?" "Does it matter?" Vivian asked. "I have it." "And you have— well, let's see." She opened a folder Arthur had left for her. "You have 3 mortgages on the Hamptons house. You have a lease on a Ferrari you can't pay for. And interestingly, you borrowed $2 million from a private lending group in New Jersey to cover the margin call on your personal trading account last week, a group that isn't known for their patience. Rob's face turned grey. You know about that. I bought that debt too. Rob, Vivian said coldly, I own your house, I own your car, and I own your debt. Tiffany suddenly stood up. This is insane. You can't do this. Rob, do something. She turned to Vivian, her eyes flashing with bratty indignation. You're just jealous. You're a bitter old ex-wife who couldn't keep her man, so you stole his company. Vivian slowly turned her gaze to Tiffany. It was like a lion looking at a mouse. Tiffany, Vivian said, I didn't steal the company. I saved it. From you. From me, I'm the marketing director. You're a 26-year-old Instagram model with a degree in communications that you barely passed, Vivian said, dropping a file on the table. I audited your department first. You spent $400,000 of company money on influencer retreats in Tulum that never happened. You billed the company for your apartment rent. That's embezzlement, Tiffany. Tiffany froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Peterson is drafting the criminal referral right now, Vivian continued casually, unless of course you return the company credit card, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and leave the building in the next 5 minutes. If you do that, I might forget to file the police report. Tiffany looked at Rob. She wanted him to save her. She wanted the powerful CEO to snap his fingers and make the mean lady go away. But Rob was staring at the table, defeated. Rob, Tiffany whimpered. Get out, Tiff, Rob muttered. But, get out, Rob screamed, slamming his fist on the table. Tiffany flinched. She grabbed her bag and ran out of the room, her heels clicking frantically down the hallway. Now it was just the two of them. The silence stretched out heavy with 12 years of marriage and 1 year of betrayal. Rob looked up. There were tears in his eyes. He tried to summon that charm, that boyish look that had made Vivian fall in love with him almost 15 years ago. Viv, he said softly. Okay. You won. You proved your point. You're brilliant. I always knew you were the brains. I got lost. The money, the fame. It got to me. He reached across the table, trying to touch her hand. Vivian pulled her hand back, as if he were radioactive. I can change, Rob pleaded. We can run this together, like we used to. You and me, Sterling and Hall. We were a good team, Viv. I need you. I'm in trouble. If I don't pay back that loan... I know, Vivian said. So, you'll help me. You bought the debt. You can forgive it. We can start over. Vivian looked at him. She looked for the man she used to love. But he wasn't there. All she saw was a parasite, a man who had drained her finances, her confidence and her joy, and then discarded her when she was empty. I didn't buy the company to get you back, Rob, Vivian said, and I didn't buy your debt to forgive it. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city she had conquered. I'm keeping the company, she said. You're fired, obviously. No severance, no golden parachute. The conflict of interest clause you used on me, it applies to you too. And the debt, Rob asked, his voice trembling. Vivian turned around. I'm restructuring it. I'm seizing the Hamptons house and the cars to pay off a portion of what you owe Phoenix LLC. As for the rest, you'll have to get a job. I hear the summit downstairs is hiring. They need someone to wash dishes. Rob stood up, his face twisting into ugly rage. You can't do this to me. I am Robert Sterling. I am this company. You were this company, Vivian corrected. Now you're just a liability I'm writing off. She pressed the intercom button on the table. Henderson, could you come to the conference room, please? We have a trespasser. When Henderson arrived, 2 minutes later, flanked by 2 other guards, Rob was slumped in his chair, weeping. Escort, mister, Sterling out of the building," Vivian said calmly. "He is not to return. If he resists, call the police." Henderson, the man Rob had ignored for a decade, stepped forward. He stood taller than he had in years. "With pleasure, Ms. Hall," Henderson said. He put a heavy hand on Rob's shoulder. "Let's go, Mr. Sterling. Don't make a scene." Vivian watched as they led him out. Rob looked back at her one last time at the door. He looked small. He looked broke. When the doors closed, Vivian was finally alone in the boardroom. The silence wasn't oppressive anymore. It was peaceful. She sat down in the CEO's chair. She swiveled it around to face the window. Her phone buzzed. It was Arthur. "It's done. The transfer is complete. You're the chairman of the board. What's your first order of business?" Vivian typed a reply. "Rehire the compliance team and order bagels for the whole office. Good ones. No more cutting corners." She put the phone down. She took a deep breath. She had her life back. But more importantly, she had her dignity back. She wasn't Vivian Sterling anymore. She wasn't the broke divorcee. She was Vivian Hall. And she had work to do. 5 years later. The rain in Manhattan never felt the same to Vivian Hall. Years ago, it felt like a cold, oppressive blanket soaking through her cheap shoes as she walked away from her life. But tonight, viewing it from the panoramic windows of the 45th floor, the rain looked like diamonds streaking against the glass, washing the city clean. The office behind her was silent, but it was a silence born of peace, not fear. The heavy mahogany walls, once the suffocating trademark of Robert Sterling's reign, were gone. In their place stood walls of tempered glass and sustainable oak. The air didn't smell of stale cigar smoke and fear anymore. It smelled of fresh orchids and possibility. The sign in the lobby no longer read Sterling and Company. It was now Hall Global. Vivian sat at the head of the conference table, the same table where she had once been handed a termination notice and a pitiful check. She ran her hand over the smooth surface. She had kept the table, but she had refinished it. She sanded down the scratches, stripped away the dark varnish, and revealed the natural lighter wood beneath. It was a metaphor she appreciated every morning. Her assistant, David, a sharp young man she had hired fresh out of NYU, knocked softly on the glass door. "Ms. Hall, the board approved the expansion into green tech logistics," David said, beaming. "Unanimous vote. Even the old guard agreed." Vivian smiled, taking the file he offered. "Thank you, David. That will be all for tonight. Go home to your family." "Are you sure, Miss Hall?" "It's the New York Titans Gala tonight. The car is downstairs. Do you want me to prep the press briefing?" "No, David. Tonight I don't need a briefing. I'm just going to enjoy the dinner." David nodded respectfully and left. Vivian stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the corner. She adjusted the lapel of her midnight blue tuxedo dress. She didn't wear ball gowns anymore. She wore armor tailored by Italians. She picked up her phone. There was a text from Arthur Penn. He had retired 2 years ago to a vineyard in Napa Valley, having turned his initial investment in Vivian into a generational fortune. Saw the quarterly figures. "You're showing off now. Don't drink too much champagne tonight." A Vivian chuckled and typed back, "I'm driving myself. No champagne, just victory." She took the private elevator down to the garage. The days of taking the subway or walking in the rain were a distant memory, though she never let herself forget how they felt. She kept her old Metro card framed on her desk as a reminder. In the VIP garage, her car waited. It wasn't a chauffeured limousine. It was a vintage Porsche 911 Targa, restored to perfection in slate grey. It was the car Rob had always talked about buying, but never had the discipline to save for. Vivian had bought it in cash 3 years ago. She slid into the leather seat, the engine roaring to life, with a throaty growl that echoed off the concrete walls. She loved driving. She loved the control. For so long she had been a passenger in her own life, letting Rob steer them off a cliff. Now her hands were the only ones on the wheel. The Pierre Hotel was a fortress of light and noise. The paparazzi were swarming the entrance, a sea of flashing bulbs and shouting voices. "Ms. Hall, over here." Vivian won Smile for the Times. "Is it true you're acquiring Kincaid completely?" Vivian stepped out of the Porsche, handing the keys to a valet attendant without looking. She walked the red carpet with a practiced ease. 5 years ago, these same photographers wouldn't have wasted a frame on her. She had been Rob Sterling's wife, a blurred figure in the background of his glory. Now she was the headline. Inside the ballroom was a kaleidoscope of wealth. The city's power players were there, hedge fund managers, tech moguls, old money dynasts. Silas Vance was holding court near the bar. The old dragon looked frail, leaning heavily on a cane, but his eyes were still sharp as razors. He waved Vivian over. "The Phoenix rises," Silas rasped, raising his glass. "I saw the stock hit $115 today. You're making it very hard for me to die, Vivian. I can't leave when the portfolio looks this good. You're too stubborn to die, Silas," Vivian said, kissing him on the cheek. "I heard a rumor," Silas said, leaning in his voice, dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "About him." Vivian didn't need to ask who him was. There was only one ghost in this room. "I don't listen to rumors, Silas." "They say he's back in the city," Silas said. "After the bankruptcy in Jersey, after the second wife left him. They say he's scraping by." "Just thought you should know." Vivian took a sip of sparkling water. "It doesn't matter where he is, Silas. He's in the past. And I don't look back." But as the night wore on, Silas's words itched at the back of her mind. She sat through the speeches, accepted her award for CEO of the Year. With a gracious, humble speech that drew a standing ovation, but she felt a strange pull, a sense of unfinished business. By midnight, the gala was winding down. Vivian said her goodbyes, shaking hands with men who had once refused to take her calls. She walked out into the cool November air, wrapping her coat tighter around herself. The valet stand was busy. A long line of Bentleys and Rolls-Royces were being retrieved. Vivian handed her ticket number 402 to the manager. "It'll be just a moment, Miss Hall. We're short-staffed tonight." The manager apologized. Vivian stepped to the side, checking her emails. The adrenaline of the night was fading, leaving her with a quiet exhaustion. She just wanted to go home, take off the heels and read a book. "Ms. Hall." The voice was rough, gravelly, familiar in a way that made the hair on Vivian's arm stand up. It wasn't the valet manager. Vivian turned slowly. Standing there, holding the keys to her Porsche, was a man in a red valet jacket that was straining at the buttons. His hair, once the thick chestnut mane that he spent hundreds of dollars styling, was thinning and grey. Deep, carved lines of stress bracketed his mouth. His posture, usually so arrogant and upright, was slumped, defeated. It was Rob. For a moment, the world seemed to stop spinning. The noise of the city, the honking taxis, the chatter of the leaving guests, it all fell away. Vivian looked at him. Really looked at him. She saw the frayed cuffs of his white shirt underneath the uniform. She saw the scuff marks on his cheap black shoes. She saw the way his hands were trembling slightly as he held out the key fob to the car he had always wanted. "Rob," she said. Her voice was steady. No anger, no fear. Just simple recognition. "Hi, Viv," Rob said. He tried to smile, but it looked painful. He glanced around nervously, terrified that his manager would see him talking to a VIP guest. I didn't know this was your car." Nice ride. Target top right. 1985. 1987, Vivian corrected gently. Right. 87. The good year? Rob shifted his weight. He looked at the ground, then forced himself to meet her eyes. The shame in them was palpable. You look incredible, Viv. I saw you on the cover of Forbes last month. The turnaround queen. That's what they called you. Work keeps me busy, Vivian said. She didn't ask him how he was. She didn't ask about Tiffany. The silence between them was thick with the history of 12 years of marriage and the brutal destruction of it. I'm doing this for a bit, Rob said, the lies spilling out reflexively. Consulting market is tough right now. Just picking up some extra cash while I structure my next venture. You know how it is. Liquidity crunch. He was lying. Vivian knew it. He knew she knew it. But she let him have the lie. It was the only thing he had left. It's honest work, Rob, she said. Rob looked at the car again. You know, I always had ideas for Sterling, for the company. If you ever needed a consultant, someone who knows the history, I could. He trailed off. The desperation in his voice was heartbreaking. This was the man who had fired her in front of a board of directors, the man who had laughed as she walked out with a cardboard box. Now he was begging for a crumb. Vivian looked at him, and she waited for the surge of satisfaction. She waited for the joy of revenge to wash over her. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times in her studio apartment in Astoria. She had imagined laughing in his face. She had imagined crushing him. But now that it was here, she felt nothing of the sort. She realized that hating him was too much energy. Hating him meant he still had power over her emotions. Seeing him like this, broken aging and reduced to parking the cars of the people he used to dine with, she didn't feel triumph. She felt pity. A distant, cold pity. Rob, Vivian said softly. I have a team. They're very good. Rob flinched as if she had slapped him. He nodded quickly, his eyes glassy. Right, of course. You have Arthur, and the new people. I get it. May I have my keys? Rob looked down at the keys in his hand. He gripped them for a second, a physical tether to the life he used, to have the life she was now living. Then he slowly held them out. Vivian took them. Their fingers didn't touch. She opened her purse. She bypassed the credit cards and the business cards. She pulled out a folded $100 bill. Viv, no. Rob whispered, his face flushing a deep, humiliated red. I can't take your money. Please, don't do this. Take it, Vivian said. Her tone wasn't mocking. It was the tone one uses with a stranger who has provided a service. It's freezing out here, Rob, and the service was quick. Buy yourself a hot meal or a drink. I can't. Take it, she repeated, pressing it into his palm. He closed his fingers around the bill. He had to. He needed it. And that need was the final nail in the coffin of Robert Sterling. Thank you, Ms. Hall, he whispered, reverting to the script of the valet. Goodbye, Rob. Vivian opened the door of the Porsche. She slid into the driver's seat, the smell of vintage leather enveloping her. She didn't look back at him. She put the car in gear, checked her mirrors, and eased off the clutch. As she pulled away from the curb, she caught a glimpse of him in the side mirror. He was standing under the awning, a small red-jacketed figure against the grand stone facade of the hotel. He was staring at the bill in his hand. Then he vanished from the mirror as she turned the corner onto Fifth Avenue. Vivian took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the cool night air. She reached over and turned up the radio. A jazz track was playing something upbeat, chaotic, and alive. She drove past the old apartment building where she had lived when she was broke. She drove past the Summit coffee shop where she had served lattes. She drove toward the bridge, toward the lights of her home. She wasn't Vivian Sterling. She wasn't the victim. She wasn't even the avenger anymore. She was just Vivian. And the road ahead was wide open. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Vivian Hall. She went from a discarded wife, clutching a cardboard box, to the CEO of a global empire, while the man who tried to destroy her ended up parking her car. It's a brutal, beautiful reminder of how the wheel of fortune turns. Rob Sterling made the classic mistake. He thought money was power. But Vivian knew the truth. Competence is power. Resilience is power. When he took everything from her, he didn't realize he was actually giving her the greatest gift of all, the hunger to build something he could never touch. Some might say Vivian was cold in that final moment. Some might say she should have yelled or gloated or maybe even helped him. But she did something more powerful. She treated him like a stranger. Because the moment you stop hating your enemy is the moment you truly win. She didn't give him her anger. She gave him a tip. That is the ultimate checkmate. What do you think? Did Rob deserve to end up as a valet? Or was the punishment too harsh for a bad husband? And if you were Vivian, would you have given him the $100, or would you have driven away laughing? I really want to know your take on this. If this story of ultimate comeback and poetic justice fired you up, please smash that like button. It helps the algorithm find more people who need to hear that it's never too late to start over. And hey, if you're currently fighting your own battle, if people have counted you out, I want you to claim your future right now. Go to the comments and type, "I am the CEO of my life." I'll be reading them and hearting the best ones. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next saga. We have a crazy story coming up next week about a lottery winner who kept it secret from his greedy family for 10 years. You don't want to miss that. Until then, keep building, keep fighting, and never let them see you sweat.